My name's Robert McDonald. I'm the Communications Director for the Tribes, or I used to be. I did that for 15 years and recently moved to work in the Natural Resources Department, specifically on the Water Compact and its implementation. I do carry over some duties where I'm empowered to go talk either to media or the community about the Water Compact, what it is, how it works, the different moving pieces. It's a lot of explaining to be done. I oversee a roads department. I oversee the program that is actively building projects to impact irrigation projects, which is part of the compact, which I can talk about in a little bit, and oversee the safety of dams program, which, those large areas where you see bodies of water, it's held there by maybe an earthen dam or some other structure, and there's a lot of measures to keep it safe and cooperation with federal agencies. So I oversee those programs as well. The Water Compact has been an idea floating around for a long time, long before I showed up at the Tribes. And our leadership has long had a decision in front of them, which is, do we go to court or do we negotiate? That's always the two choices. And I've sat through multiple councils chewing on that decision, hearing input from the attorneys and cultural leaders. And a lot of people would even ask, why are we even trying to answer this question? Well, I guess because the simple answer is we have to engage in this process. Water rights and the Water Compact, these are all difficult topics because you're talking about a piece of paper and rights and law. And at the other end, we're talking about water. Everybody needs water to drink. Everybody needs water to survive. Farmers, new homes need wells. It's critical for a community, individuals. So there's a lot at stake with water, and there's a lot of laws that govern it. And I imagine your students know that there's a lot of complications already in place with the reservation and our history and the checkerboard and the land ownership, and water's another level on top of that. You have, when I try to explain this, I start with the fact of the reservations and the water rights on the reservation. They're federal-based rights, and each state within it has bodies of federal rights, reservations, federal lands like Forestry Service, military bases. So there were questions that went through the courts of, do these federal bodies go to the federal court to decide what their water right is from the paper, or do they go to the state court? And with the tribal relationship with the federal government, we would have preferred to deal with the federal government. They know us. They know their trust responsibility to us. And despite some tough history, they kind of get it, right? The state, we're not always convinced the state has the tribal interests at heart. And, there's been a lot of great successes and evolutions, but the battles were fought in the court, and it came out, tribes, you've got to do your federal rights, what we call a quantification. How do you take this piece of paper and quantify it and measure? What kind of rights do you get? Do you get all of it? Do you get some of it? Do you get a little tiny bit? What do you get? That boils down to how the state processes your argument for saying this is our right. Now, how does that happen? Montana did something very interesting. They created a new governmental body that was empowered by the state legislature to negotiate for these agreements, because the state saw the tribes had very strong cases in water rights. And in Montana, it's called first in use, first in right. So whoever used the water first has the senior right. And whoever has the senior right can use all the water they need before the next person in line gets it, and so forth and so on. Well, the tribe did sign a treaty in 1855, and that was the creation of the Flathead Indian Reservation, and those were really the first water rights in place. And plus we acknowledge time immemorial rights before then that basically go on forever. So that's a starting point. And then non-tribal people were allowed legally to occupy the reservation beginning 1910 with the Flathead Indian Allotment Act. And so all the non-tribal people had what was called a junior right to the tribal right. So legal analysis says tribes bring this to court. It puts the state kind of in a difficult position because we have all the strength, and that was what council had to decide on. We got a pretty good looking case, but you go to court, you don't know how it's going to come out. The ruling that comes out may not be exactly a good fit. It might tie our hands in ways we can't foresee. Potentially things could go wrong and we lose much more than we anticipated. So when you negotiate, as council had always said, I mean, they anguished over these decisions. Some elders said never negotiate, and I know many took that to heart, but they saw the pieces that if you negotiate, you know the outcome. You can control it. You can know what you're going to get. But you also know with any agreement like this or any compact, a good one means everyone leaves it unhappy. No one is happy with these agreements because no one gets exactly what they want, but you all get something which was important, and that's certainty. You know what you're going to get. So around 2000, the tribes started the process. They put forward a letter kind of stating, here is how we view the water on our land. It is all our water. Now the state has a similar view. All the water in the state is Montana water. So you have these two competing viewpoints, and the state, with this compact commission, empowered to do these negotiations, said, well, we got these other reservations, and they're not as complicated as your situation. They don't have this mixed checkerboard pattern of land ownership. They're a little smaller. We got the military bases, so we're going to get good at this and circle back to you. So we had time to continue what we were doing, measuring our water, and our science is solid, and devising how we can make this work. About 2008 is when it started getting serious again. So once a month we would have these meetings with the Compact Commission, and all council would be there, and there'd be elders from the Kootenai Culture Committee, and the Salish Pond Array Culture Committee would be there, and the community would kind of trickle in and show up, and there were a lot of negotiations that went on for years, and they went at a glacial pace. It was about 2008 when it got serious, where the tribal negotiating team would meet with the Compact Commission regularly, once a month. And at times it was like watching paint dry. We introduced the idea of something called unitary management, which is a big word and talks about managing the groundwater and surface water as one unitary thing, which was a foreign concept, or the reality that you have different populations with different types of rights. You got the tribal right, which is through a federal court. You've got the non-tribal, which would probably go through the state court. Now, if those two people go down the path of getting permissions and okays and then they cross, do those two courts talk to each other? Or do they have to go to a high court? And it's just because of our complicated population, tribal, non-tribal, the ideas were proposed of let's maybe create a board empowered with the duties of tribal and state water rights and being the judge of hearing the cases and making decisions. And that was a rare creation and kind of it took time for the commission to kind of hear that, process it, understand how it could work. Will that fly? Because ultimately, from 2008 to about 2011, the idea is, can we put together an agreement that the state legislature can pass? And it was about that time that outside groups took an interest, and they started showing up with loud, interesting, I would say, not exactly factual claims, which started bringing media attention and controversy, and headlines were running about the compact will damage our community, the compact will hurt people. And with that came more crowds and more strong voices. And so in that environment, you still have the tribal negotiating team trying to push this forward of what we can live with. And you still have the state trying to craft something that they think the legislature can pass. At the same time, the tribal leadership is thinking, what if negotiations fail? You know, we can't just be left high and dry. So we're also preparing to go to court. So there's a lot of water and a lot of science and a lot of measurement that they kept track of and organized in these complex systems and put in reports so that they could, with expertise, share the data with the state and explain exactly what's at stake and explain the depth and length of the tribal history with the lands and the original language of the treaty. And a lot of information and research went into dozens and dozens of reports, which basically made the case of, here's what we think we deserve. And the state trying to comprehend how they can make this work. So, believe it or not, through that environment, a compact was agreed upon. The commission, the Montana Water Rights Compact Commission, it's called, made the presentation to the legislature. It went in, and it became instantly a lightning rod. You had hundreds of people filling these sessions in the House, and this, actually, it got stuck. When bills go to die, they usually get sent to a committee. And it went to the committee, and it was like, oh, we don't have the votes to get it out. It died in 2011. And so it gave us time to kind of regroup and say, well, okay, we didn't anticipate that much opposition, and realized that a lot of the misinformation, this is before Trump, before the national headlines and before misinformation became a national art form. We kind of experienced it early on our reservation. And did a lot of outreach to farmers and ranchers across the state, because this wasn't just our reservation. What is really interesting and the nuance that misses most people is the type of treaty that we have. It's known as a Stevens Treaty, and Isaac Stevens was U.S. Army. He didn't have a lot of passion for the job, but he wanted to be important and a big shot. So he came rushing out, and he did the Washington tribes in that territory. He did Idaho tribes, and he did one Montana tribe, which was us. And why am I telling you this? Is because in all of Stevens' treaties, there's one phrase in there, that the tribes may continue to hunt in usual and accustomed places, hunt and fish. And that language, which was interpreted by the courts through multiple decisions and questioning, evolved into a right to go off the reservation into documented known places. And we have the history to show we went all over the state. We have place names, we have evidence of trails and extensive history statewide. So we had rights that extended off the reservation. Montana hadn't had to deal with that before. We were the only tribe that has that language. So, well, we are simply trying to take this piece of paper and quantify it and make the case that this is what we believe we're entitled to because of these agreements, these legal precedents, and how it played out in the courts. And if you don't want to negotiate with us, we can go to court. We are ready either way. So that knowledge base of why are the tribes, it kind of evolved from why are the tribes taking more than they should, I think was a common refrain. Who do they think they are? Well, we know who we are, and we know what we're entitled to, and we know what we're promised, and we don't just believe it, we can document it. So there were some key provisions in there that nobody would lose access to their water. It was very important to have an area in there that says existing uses will be protected. So let's say you moved into the Mission Valley and you heard you're supposed to go to the state and file a piece of paper saying, I filed this well. Well, I don't want them to know. I just punched a hole in the ground and did my well. To heck with that whole system. What's going to happen to that person? Well, by compact, we agreed, okay, even those people will get a way to get a right so that they will have that use of water for their home and they won't be left high and dry. So protected existing uses. The irrigation project as a whole other ball of wax. I'll talk about that. That's over 1,100 miles of irrigation canals, 23 geographic areas across the reservation that delivers water from multiple places to people who grow things. We're ranchers. And that's a big part of the economy here. So they're very concerned from everything they've heard, rumors, what could happen to them, and so they approach these meetings with fear and anger, and you can't do this to me. Well, we're not doing that to you. Well, prove to me you're not going to hurt me. So that was kind of the tone of meetings for 3 years. And that outreach really started to make a difference. 2013, we're back in the state legislature. It is called by all the media the most contentious issue the state has ever seen. The House had hours upon hours, 8, 10 hours, 12 hours of testimony, lines out the door. And some of it was very hard to hear, because some of it was politics. They got very extreme in their accusations and attacks, and then the supporters would explain, I understand what it really does, and I appreciate the effort of the tribes negotiating and willing to give all these protections for irrigation and growth of the economy and make room. And the compact itself is 54, 60 some pages, and there's a bunch of appendices, which is interesting because those tend to come after a compact, but we hammered them out before. And that's several hundred more pages that explains in this basin, in this area, water in these streams is handled this way and this way, and there's not a lot of room for surprises. And it's pretty elegant. It was all based upon the science of water measurement, because in 1982 we started a water measurement program and have it down cold and found every record we could of high levels, low levels. And why do we do that? Well, we care about the animals. We care about the environment. And the bull trout is an near endangered species, not officially listed, but in threat. That has driven a lot of things on lake management. MAC Days is an effort to lower the population of the non-bull trout, the invasive species, and create a habitat where, and it's a very sensitive habitat. They need the estuaries, or they need the small creek beds to spawn and get back, and so they get beaten out by the more aggressive fish that can live in deep water, and a number of biological things have happened through the years that have endangered. We've seen the salmon disappear that used to come through, and the bull trout seem to be next, and we're doing everything we can to protect it. And they need a certain amount of cold, clean water. Now, when you irrigate, that water tends to be the opposite of cold and clean. So there's great interest in keeping those 1,000 miles of irrigation canals from intersecting with the clean water for fish. And we need certain minimum levels of water to make sure their habitat is healthy and they can thrive. And so you have a limited amount of water, although here there is quite a bit. And you have all these competing interests. You got the farmers that want their water to grow their things, to make a living. We need the water to preserve the species that help us be who we are as a people in the last place on the planet where we can be who we are, our home reservation. And all these governmental systems trying to figure out how to serve their population. I think the goal of government is to come up to a decision where people can live with it. And the solution was put forward in 2015 to the legislature, and it was close and it looked dicey. It passed. 2015, we have the state legislature pass the compact, and it's like, wow, can't believe we got that done, and celebrate, and the governor signs, and people who were fighting against it saw the light and came and joined it, and it was an amazing story unto itself. And that was only 1/3 of the way there, because at that point it's got to go to the federal level. It's got to go through Congress. It's like, Congress? Does anything get through Congress? How can our little reservation, we're bigger than Rhode Island, but we're still a small western Montana people, but our team jumped on it. They brought forward the damage that had been done to our lands, to our resource. St. Mary's Lake, I went there as a kid and I didn't realize that, you know, they built a canal delivery through there, and it's just eroded to this little mini Grand Canyon of erosion and giant exposed boulders and giant trees toppling in. Seeing it with your own eyes, you can't believe the damage. And that's one of dozens of disasters, travesties done by the people who were in charge of our resources, who were in charge of taking care of us. And so we could document, because of the mismanagement of this project, among other things, this is the value of the harm done to us, and this is the value it would take to attempt to put a price on making it right again. And we put forward in 4 years these claims, the damage assessment, the impact, the irrigation project. I mean, came about at 1910. The reservation opens up to homesteading. We know this, and we become a minority on our own reservation. The U.S. government had already done an account and an allotment of lands to tribal members and declared the rest surplus. So they're selling, they're giving. Everybody gets, a piece of it. Yellow Bay Research Station, universities. Oh, we'll take that. Teddy Roosevelt goes, 18,000 acres. We could put that bison herd in there. We'll take that. The state has an education system, public schools, and they go, look at all these tracts of land. What if we took every 25th one or something like that? And so you can see in the map, there's a gray part of state land. And I was wondering, what is that? It's very much a pattern, like it was done on purpose. It was done on purpose to take the land, and they make money from leasing it or selling the trees or any interest they can find on it. And so they've been harvested, and that's land not owned by the tribes. All of these things were done to us, and the irrigation project came along, and I'm very proud of this, actually, because there's a PhD paper that was published by SKC Press, and it lists a report done by, I don't remember the first names, but I'm a McDonald, I'm also a Matt. I'm a McDonald, but also a Matt. My mom's a Matt. And in the report, there are two people, a Matt and McDonald, who filed a report to the U.S. government that said the natives who were farmers and irrigators did better without this project. They say they don't want it and they don't need it, and the money used to purchase the construction of it is raised with selling the land that they don't want to sell. There is nothing good about this. And we fought everything we could. We wrote letters and complained. Of course, we weren't U.S. citizens. We had no authority. We couldn't stop the building of the dam. We couldn't stop the irrigation project. It was wave after wave of these attacks on our ability to live, even. Kind of amazing to stop and pause and go, wow, we all survived all of that. So we're in it. The irrigation project is coming along, and the research is able to reveal the depth of impact to us. And of course there's skepticism, because we were looking at a $2 billion settlement is the price tag that we were putting through the congressional hallways, of different federal departments and attorneys and teams, and through the Department of the Interior experts. And they were like, whoa, we have never seen a water settlement from a tribe with these kinds of numbers. And we're like, yes, we're well aware of that. Sit down. We'd like to explain how we got there. And we explain it. And again, it's like, that's hard to deny because it is backed up to the nth degree. John Tester took a run at it, didn't get the other senator to join in. It didn't get a lot of support, kind of died on the vine. So we needed both senators. Senator Daines has a more conservative body, supporters and philosophy, and we're working with him. What do you need? Showed him the analysis. Look, we still have the option of going to court, but we're negotiating. We got it through the state legislature. They said that was impossible, and here we are. Daines agreed to pick it up after really learning it, putting the work in, and asked for us to limit the off-reservation claims, to reduce the number and make them kind of co-ownership off the reservation. So the river flows off the res onto the res, this and that. But we found areas that weren't as important to us that we were willing to concede for this and that. It was 2015, of course, the state legislature passed. In December 2020, Congress passed the Montana Water Rights Protection Act. And that was a Steve Daines bill. It had some cold feet at times. It was interesting to host Attorney General William Barr in Pablo in council chambers, prayed with some of our people, met with council, met with SKC officials, and was on his way to have a meal with Senator Daines, which I heard later, third hand, that it was basically William Barr saying this is the best path forward for all citizens. And Daines got rid of the cold feet and plunged ahead. He told council, I'm going to make this happen. And he did. It passed through Congress. $1.9 billion was the tag attached to it. It went down a little bit from the higher figures, in part because it also involved the restoration of the National Bison Range. 18,000 acres taken from us, and at one time had policy written that they couldn't hire tribal people to work there, would be returned to us, and we are operating that as we speak, putting our signs up, our management practices, and just joyful. We had a big celebration with the Secretary of the Interior. Deb Haaland came and joined us. So one of the other elements that we built in there is, obviously since Tribal Council was formed in 1935 under the Indian Reorganization Act, their early efforts were to rebuild the reservation, to restore it. And so when we can, we buy back what land we can. Land's very expensive. People know this is our practice, and so slowly we're seeing the land ownership go up bit by bit. But like I said, there's a huge price tag. We get 18,000 acres back with the bison range. It used to be on the maps, if it's owned by the tribe, held in trust, it's green. Federal land is purple. So to see the purple spot of the bison range go from purple to green, that meant a lot. And if you look at the map, I was talking earlier about those sections owned by the state to raise money for the public education system. Part of the compact is restoring those to tribal ownership. So there is a process in place and underway to identify what lands are best suited to restore to us, because some are leased, some have private ownership, some have complications, but quite a few do not. And so instead of just repeating past history of just taking them back, leaving the state in lurch, the feds said, we pointed out that that's not a possibility in this day and age. We learn from those past mistakes. So the federal government forestry land is going to trade equal value sections of land for the tribal sections. And so you'll see those silver gray squares of non-tribal land become green, bing, bing, and they'll pop up. And you'll see a trade of federal land, which will probably raise more money for the school system, and it's a win-win. Tough process, a lot of committed people making that happen, so that is going forward. I joined the tribe in 2006. I'd worked in newspapers and media and studied journalism, and had not had a chance to work for a chairman named Mickey Pablo. He was quoted probably weekly by different leaders, department heads, council members. And they said, Mickey always had a vision that we will settle our water rights somehow. We will have a return of the bison range, and we will purchase the dam on our lands. All things that were kind of done to us. And I was thinking, mid-30s when I got here, late 30s. I can't imagine those things happening in my lifetime. Here we are. In our lifetime, we're seeing these things. So a year ago, the compact gets through Congress, or not a year ago, it's December 2020, President Trump signs the compact. It is law. It puts into motion all kinds of elements. We're waiting for the important signature to come from the Secretary of the Interior. It's called the enacting of the compact. And so they're, analyzing, making sure everything's good. A lot of details to check. And so September 17th, 2021, the Secretary of the Interior signs the compact. It is enacted. It's like, okay, those are big words, Rob. What does that mean? So, well, forevermore from that point, the state has no jurisdiction over water within the exterior boundaries of the Flathead Indian Reservation. The authority is the Flathead Reservation Water Management Board, which was given 6 months to be created by compact. So anyone who resides on the reservation, tribal or non-tribal, if you think it's beautiful here, which it is, and want to bring your family here and buy a place, you go to a real estate agency and you buy a home, and you want to build one and you need a well on that property, you used to be able to go to the state and have a process and deal with the water court eventually. And now all water rights go to the Flathead Reservation Water Management Board. And that's a new creation, and people are learning about it, and it's growing daily as we go. The Flathead Reservation Water Management Board is made of 5 people. 2 are appointed by tribal council. 2 are appointed by the governor's office. They all have different term limits, like 1 year and 3 year. And then those 4 in place choose a 5th person that the 4 can agree upon. And so those all were in place as of February 2022. I think that's correct. I'm checking my math. As of February 2nd, 2022, the board is fully in place and able to make decisions. They found an office in downtown Ronan. It's the old Masonic building by the movie theater and the bowling alley. And they have public meetings there. They broadcast them on Zoom. And they discovered right away that there is a population of people who needed a well for their home. They were on contract to complete their loan to buy a property. And they were working with the department that deals with that, the DEQ, Montana. But nobody was sure when the secretary would sign this. So some people were mid-process, working with the state. The old process, you just had to file work saying, I'm planning on getting this done, and I'm going to get a letter and document it. All goes into a box to be dealt with later. As of September 17th, they could only deal with the water board. And so the state went, we can no longer work with you on this. You have to go work with. And so they showed up on the board saying, I've got 3 weeks to close my loan, or I lose my place in line or my interest rate, and start looking at fines, and I can't get permission for a well, and the board is brand new and can basically say, well, there is no permit to give you because there is no permit, there is no form, there is no process. We are building that. We are literally at the ground floor of a new reality and new world. And so the board jumped on it this summer. They came up with 2 forms for those who were caught in that situation, and over 120 people have received permission to go ahead with their well and finish their homes, and roughly 20 a week come through there, plus every other complication. Businesses are waiting, but we're focusing primarily, the board is focusing primarily on single-family homes or homes that have 35 forgot the exact measurement. They're working on single-family homes as opposed to larger businesses or whatnot. So, but they are getting to that point. So, every resident that lives within the boundaries of the reservation is under the governance of that board, which is empowered by the agreement of the tribes, the state, and Congress. I did leave out one part. I said the state passed it, of course, 2015. Congress passed it 2020, signed by the president. And soon after that, tribal council, they could have said no. They had the final option to say, we don't like this agreement, we're going to go to court. Ultimately, tribal council voted to sign it late December 2021. So you would think it's a done deal. You would think the compact, but there is another process to contend with, the water court. Montana has this water court, and they have to, what they call, adjudicate these items. And because of the reservation being in a place where we argued in court, the state has no jurisdiction over our water, back off, because the state was handing out permits left and right, and we're like, can you hand out my stuff? And the state said, well, is it your stuff? And I just summed up 6 years of legal with a hallway conversation. So the tribes won. State could not legally give any permission to do anything, but people still had to fill out the paperwork, and it all went into a box. And that will be run through the water court eventually. So we kind of have two processes going on. Currently, if you live on the reservation, and the state knows about you because you filed paperwork for, water this or that, you got a letter that said you have until December 6th to file a complaint against the water compact if you believe it will hurt you or affect you negatively. If you believe so, please explain why. So this is a technical question. This probably requires an attorney to explain. And so, as of early November, approximately 12 have been filed. Probably more coming. But the water court will then evaluate each of these and decide which one actually is serious or makes a question that must be answered. Some might be frivolous, that just says, I just don't like it. That's not something that the court system, as I understand it, was set up for. It's looking at people who feel they'll be harmed by the compact. And then those will be evaluated, dealt with, and go through the process. And when those are all dealt with, the court will go from what's called pre-adjudication to adjudication. They will complete their process, and no one can make objection legally to the water compact from that point on. There were so many processes, so many words, so many laws on paper, despite the fact that we went from not knowing what would happen to the water on the reservation to a water compact passing through the state legislature, Congress and the president passing it through, the tribes passing it, and the water court. That is all happening. So we are in the era of the compact, moving through these processes. You think that's probably all there is to talk, but there is another piece, which I call implementation. How do you implement a water compact? What does that mean? In short, it's a lot, but it actually. Clear my thoughts for a second. Yeah. Implementation really is taking the rights established by the compact, and I work for the tribe. I work in the interest of the tribe and its leadership. It's our job to take that water right and expand it, improve it as much as we can. So by compact, we have the empowerment to take a good hard look at the Flathead Indian Irrigation Project. Like I said, it's over 1,000 miles of canals. Now, some of these were built after the Civil War, 20 years after the Civil War. They're old, decrepit, failing systems. It's not very efficient. As a model, if you put 100 gallons in one end, you'll get 25 out the other. It leaks. Where it leaks into some neighbors who like it. Some areas it leaks in and creates wetlands. And you have to protect wetlands now. So if we take out a wetland, we have to mitigate that. But the tribe's value system is the land, the water, the wildlife. So this is this tremendous opportunity to do some real good here, because the way the compact is set up is we have all the existing users, all the farmers, all the irrigators in this project. they will get the water they've always gotten, guaranteed. That's part of the compact. That's why the farmers and ranchers supported it. And okay, so they get delivered this water in this broken system. They get enough water. Well, the tribes plan to invest millions of dollars into this system, dozens of millions, if not hundreds of millions. Why would we do that? Be it taking open canal and making it closed pipe, or these leaky headworks that holds the water, that are leaking water everywhere, and make it more modern and efficient so that they can control it easier and better and push the water where they need to. Why would we do that? Well, I guess the key word would be efficiencies. If we can study this and pick on this complicated system, a project in the Jocko, a project in the Mission Valley, a project in Crow Creek, and if we invest a $6 million new headworks in there, and it raises the efficiencies of, like I said, if you put in 100 gallons in one end and you get 25, we do 3 of these projects, that number 25 goes up to 27. We do 3 or 4 more, it goes up to 30. So, okay, we're more efficient. We're getting more of the water from one end to the other. Why is that important? That's important because the tribes are authorized to capture and reallocate that water. And if we reallocate that water, we essentially fuel our fisheries. We get more and better water to the bull trout populations, to areas that may have been dewatered by management we didn't agree with when we had no control. Bringing back to life areas that may have come close to not running anymore or running. We can build the reservation back up to our original understanding of it. We can reclaim it again. So once again, the tribes finds itself able to impact systems that negatively impacted us. And we can impose upon it our tribal values, our view, our system,